Okay, everybody, let's get started again. And thank you, Rosalie, for bringing the coffee. We all very much appreciate it. So,
thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, God. Perfect.
Okay, so Mr. Kokopoulos has provided a fairly extensive overview of the cost factors, et cetera, of the various departments. So first of all, are there any questions from anybody, Lynn, on any of the items that we have seen? So I'm going to start with Councillor Timmers. Do you have any questions, Councillor Timmers?
I only have a couple of small questions. We did have this one answered, but maybe we'll just ask it. Councillor Thompson and I were wondering, on scenario number 3, the levy requirement where it was decreased, I know you've already answered this, but if you could answer it for everyone that's here, what cuts were made to remove that amount from the levy?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to Councillor Timmers. I did during the break answer this particular question, but again, I think we heard loud and clear from Council. We need to go back. We need to look at lowering the impact on the levy. What we did in that particular area is look at some of our training accounts. We looked at deferring some of those particular items. We looked at our economic development account, and there was a potential to defer some of those monies. We looked at a phased approach to some of the equipment requirements within fire, and could we do like we've done historically? And I think that Council's directed us to look at a phased approach to the purchase of particular items, and would that have any impact from an operational standpoint? We also looked at some of our IT works and where there's some deferrals that we could make, again, from a training perspective. And so we believe that we can. We believe that that's a scenario that from a staff perspective we can support. Are there going to be some small operational tweaks and amendments we're going to have to make? Absolutely. But at the end of the day, I think we heard loud and clear from Council that you want us to sharpen our pencils and figure out where we could lower this budget.
Just one more question, Mr. Chairman. Also, thank you for that answer on that. That cleared that. And just on the blended rate, total impact to the taxpayer, we're looking at 2.93, about $100 per year, and it says residential assessment of $100,000. Is that correct, or would that be based on a residential assessment of $333,000? So
through you, Madam Chair, you'll see that the 37, through you, Mr. Chairman, I apologize. My apologies. This is not going to go well now. It's going to go downhill after that comment. You'll see that the percentage to Councillor Timmers, you'll see that the percentage is 2.93. We decided, because I think there were some questions, is $333,000. How do you do the math there? So the impact is $37 per 100,000. It is 2.93.
Oh,
and so when you do the math, it does equate, but we just wanted to share with...
Perfect, got it. Thank you.
So it's the 2.93. I think, what we're trying to do as part of this budget, and again, I think, we heard from Councillor Brunet, make it as easy as possible. Give people both the dollars as well as the percentages.
Got it, thank you.
Okay, Lynn, is that good? Councillor Brunet, do you have any questions for the CAO?
Not necessarily for the CAO. I have some questions for. Are we just directing it to the CAO?
You can throw forward whatever questions you wish.
Thank you, Chair Foster. So I see there's no chief here tonight, but a deputy chief, and so my questions surrounding fire services. We've talked. Chief Hudson has constantly reminded us of the provincial average of 9 minutes and the response time of 13 minutes. I think in this budget there are a number of volunteers that are being asked for. If my math is correct, I stand to be corrected if it's not, that wages are going up 6,000 between full-time and part-time. So my question is, how many volunteer firefighters are we looking to add? And is that a direct reflection of the fact that we're not hitting our response time? In other words, what's driving the additional volunteers? Is it that we're having a tough time getting volunteers out to the calls, or is it a direct reflection to that response time? So that's my first question to Mr. Blake.
So should I pass that to Mr. Blake, Mr. Kokopoulos?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, absolutely. I mean, I think SMT is here to answer questions. If there's any other additional comments that I'd like to make, I'll definitely get your attention.
Okay, Mr. Blake.
Thank you, through you, Chair Foster. Just if I can break down the question again here, we're looking for approximately now, including our higher level, not full-time employees in the fire department, we're looking at approximately in the 90s right now, 95, 94, and we're going up to 114 total. So we're looking at anywhere from, give or take, a few senior firefighters that right now we're having discussions with. They're sitting on the fence, if I can use that term. We're looking at hiring upwards to 18 to 20 volunteers. In saying that, we won't hire quantity over quality. We've learned from our errors. However, we did have a great response to our volunteer firefighter open houses we just had, and applications have been flooding in. In regards to the why are we going up levels and where did that come from, it came from provincial statistics as well as the fire master plan, and basically the direct impact is exactly what you're going with there, is hitting our benchmarks, especially where we don't meet them a lot of times in our response criteria with proper numbers in a proper amount of time. So we're looking to fill more voids, hopefully concentrating on the daytime available, working with shift workers, local businesses, and things that we keep reaching out to. That continues to be our worst time. So I hope that answers the questions. If I can clarify anything else.
And can I do a quick follow-up with what he just answered? So is part of what the fire department going to do, and it seems to be a common theme that's going to be going on this evening, I think, are we going to be regularly getting metrics from you and understanding with this investment that's going on, how much better we're getting within some of these areas? Because I think some of these numbers are fairly critical, if I'm not mistaken, to meet some of the insurance values, other things as well. So is that part of the plan of the fire department?
Yeah, through you, Chair Foster. That's exactly, I think through SMT meetings, the ones I've been involved with and the ones the chief has spoke to me on afterwards, I think that's our goal right from the CAO down through all managers, is to be more, not that we've ever been holding back on anything, but be more fulsome with our metrics and show the positives, and as well as hopefully not, but the negatives if they are there, and being more full up front as we go along.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bernay?
Thank you for that. So I guess my only other question to the CAO is, so in terms of the FTEs, so we've gone from discussion a week ago or so where we were talking about 3 FTEs to one that you're saying has no implication on the tax levies in the public works. One, classifying that as a on that levy, and 4 additional. I'm okay with that for now. I think there needs to be
Okay, thank you. Councillor Thompson?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Just wondering through you to the CAO, if you could speak to the request that was made for library IT synergies and that report that was, the information update rather, that was given to us. And further to that, perhaps the opportunity for further integration and efficiencies not just in IT, but perhaps in purchasing or other avenues with the library. Because I'd like to make sure that we're all sort of playing on the same team and we're, using those synergies to propel us all forward.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, so I know CEO Nicholson is here as well. She may have something to add, but let me take a stab at answering, I think, both those questions. Jill does sit around our SMT table. I know there were some things identified within the work plan when the work plan was set that look at us working a little bit more collaboratively together. Some of those things need to get started. I think, there have been conversations when we look at things around facilities, when we look at things of, things we need to do from that perspective between the two agencies. Do I think we can establish better relationships and continue to, explore opportunities? Absolutely. As it relates to, I think, some of the IT questions, you did receive an update from John Brown through Director Fife in terms of the capital expenditures and were there opportunities from a shared services perspective to see cost savings in 2017. We did identify through that outline that there could be a cost savings in the amount of $20,800. We also explored from an operating expenditures perspective, would there be any changes from an operating standpoint? I think when we look at that and we go through that, there actually isn't any savings from that particular perspective. I think where the savings potentially are found are on the capital side. So I think, again, John's here. He can speak to it in a little bit more detail if I've missed anything. But I think we think there are both short and long-term savings on the capital expenditure side of life due to the elimination of redundant equipment. Some of our servers and firewalls, we're actually doing that, twofold. We're doing it here. We're doing it at the library. I think one of the questions asked at that time was, is there sufficient capacity to incorporate that storage and execution requirements within our own systems based on what the library's infrastructure is? I think John spoke to that and highlighted that there is additional capacity. I think we are looking at the library in Vineland, and is there an ability to add some value by integrating some of the town's infrastructure with that perspective, or from that perspective, and looking if we could offset some of the costs by doing that. And so I think overall on the capital side, we definitely see an opportunity to find some savings and to look at some better integration.
Yeah, thank you. That's good to hear. Certainly, as the entity providing funding for that particular department, I would certainly love to see more metrics and where they're at with regards to targets that they've set. Certainly some strategic goals and whatnot would be something that I would personally like to see. That will help us to help them as best we can move forward. So if that's possible, that's something I would definitely like to see moving forward.
Thank you. Any other questions at this point, Councillor Thompson? I'm going to move to Councillor McPherson. So, Councillor McPherson, questions?
Well, just in with regard to the FTEs, I think that it's a big number, 2% of the overall levy. That's a big number for us, and I think we have agreed that we need to invest in the organization, and we need to put the right positions in place to take us, to the growth that we're looking for. So, other than, the one that we've got as legislative coordinator, and that's the first I think we've seen of this, it appears to be an administrative position, and as I understand your explanation, it's basically a note taker for the committee meetings and also some legislative, whatever you would call that, making sure we're in line with legislation. Is that accurate?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I think I'd probably be doing a disjustice to those that have the experience within the legislative services to suggest it's just a minute taker. I think in a lot of ways it would function no different than our deputy clerk and clerk in a lot of ways. Our clerk has a lot of other additional responsibilities that he's responsible for as the Director of Corporate Services. I think we've talked about more of a focus on legislative services within that particular department, but the legislative coordinator, is very much, I'm not going to call it a junior version of William here, but because I don't think we can match Will, but it very much is a role that has that legislative expertise. It's meant to not only take minutes, and I think, again, I do it justice if that's what it was. It really is to provide counsel advice. It's to, make sure that we're adhering to the right policies. It is no different. You will, between the three, I think, legislative supports within and the legislative folks within corporate services, all three will have a similar skill set in William, Gary, and this new person that we're calling a legislative coordinator. That is kind of the industry title for that particular position. So it definitely is a position that will provide legislative advice and legislative support to council. Again, no different than the two staff we have right now within our clerks group.
So that wouldn't be something that the deputy clerk would do, or are they doing that today?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I think to answer Councillor McPherson's question, I think, as we went through these business case developments and we had this question, and I can tell you, it was good to see other members of SMT, I think, challenging members of SMT in a very productive way to say, can we make do with this position? Can we make do with that? We did go through that exercise. We did look at, could we look at the two existing legislative individuals within the clerk's department, being William and Gary? Could we look at the additional works that are both being demanded and legislated of us? And could we do it within that complement? I think there was and I'll let our clerk speak to this as well. I think there was a determination made that requirement and that resource is required in order to deliver, I think, on just the increasing amount of work and legislative elements to what we do as municipalities and to what you do as council. I mean, this, clerks is really the support to council. They're the support to making sure that the organization moves forward from a legislative framework. But I will let Will kind of speak in a little bit more depth if he has anything to add to what I've said as it relates to the role of legislative coordinators within the framework of the clerk's organization.
I think Mike has covered most of it. I can add more if you want, but hopefully that covers it, I think, in a nutshell.
Okay. Just a comment about the roads and road rehabilitation, and I know we've made a significant investment in roads over the last couple of years, and again with the $2 million that we're investing this year. When we went back to when we did the 2015 budget, we talked about roads a lot, and we spent a good deal of time going through a very in-depth analysis of what has been spent in the past, and here's what we need to bring our roads to a maintained level. And I think we've got away from that a little bit. I understand that we are investing in other areas, but I know we've got a roads assessment update coming in 2017, and I'd like to see us next year get back to those levels that we started back in the 2015 budget, and really get back on the roads focus that we had coming out of the election.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to Councillor McPherson. Yeah, absolutely, Councillor. I think I hear loud and clear. I think I've heard loud and clear since my first meeting the priority that this council, and I'll suggest in talking to other CAOs, every council places on roads and road rehabilitation. It is the one thing that impacts everyone who drives, who walks on those roads. I know just today we had someone come in and talk to us about roads and needing to invest in roads, and invited our Director of Finance to go for a drive on a road in front of his particular property in order to identify that The road is in need of road rehabilitation. I hear you loud and clear. I can tell you, I think the roads need study will be important, but, moving forward, we need to increase the amount. You're right. I think in 2015, council made an investment of close to $1.7 million in terms of the urban roads, in terms of the road rehabilitation works. That has been around 1.4 the last few years. We need to increase that. Notwithstanding, there is an element to the way we've presented it today. We need to continue to invest in roads and not necessarily look at just the one major project and incorporate that into roads, but look at what are our roads rehabilitation needs and continue to bring that forward and add to the amounts that we've currently got before you.
Okay, one other thing, if I may, Mr. Chair. The long-term debt, and if we did get it, you'll have to pardon me, but last year we got a breakdown that went out maybe 10 years by item. And when is that in the package that we have this year?
Through you, Mr. Chairman. I mean, we can definitely share that with you. I think what we did is look at over the next 4 or 5 years what's going on and what's coming off. We did it at the last presentation, and we spoke to which roads projects or which infrastructure projects were coming off in 17, 18, and 19, and what was going on between 17, 18, 19, and 20. We can definitely recirculate that. It is in the previous presentation. We can do a much longer projection for council so that you've got kind of, a look at what elements of the debt are going forward and what's coming on again and what's coming off.
Yeah, I think that'd be great. With this one, it went out to 2023, so it was nice to see all of the various long-term debt projects and how much they were each year and when they were coming off. The other thing, question around debt is, with our interest rates starting to move, have we taken that into account over the next 10 years?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to the councillor, let me quickly provide a comment as it related to the other item, and you had suggested out to 2023. We've projected our debt and our outstanding debentures out to actually 2027. So when we come back to you, we'll come back to you with a longer projection in terms of what's coming on and what's going off. Again, I'll take you to the slide that I've got here. It is trending in the right direction. We need to stick to this. And we need to make sure that when we're coming to you, we're not adding new elements to this so that this chart continues to go in the right direction, that it continues to come down. It is peaking in 2020, and it is coming down. I can tell you, I think, again, in talking to our auditors today, and that was just one of those things that seemed to happen on the right day for me. And instead of focusing on, meeting the new auditors, I actually asked a bunch of questions in terms of, as I'm heading into a budget process, what are your thoughts on X and what are your thoughts on Y? I think what, we are, and they reminded me that we continue to look at interest rates and we need to continue to look at that. Are we projecting out, I think, as far as you're suggesting? No, we're not. I think right now we're looking at it in that shorter, I'm going to suggest 1 to 3 year time frame. We're looking at where interest rates are. I think we need to course correct as we move through the process. And I think those are some of the things that we need to present to you. We've talked about looking at our financial principles. We've talked about updating those financial principles. I did talk about that with our auditors. They do that sort of work. I wanted them to review the principles we have. I think they're good principles that council put in place a decade ago. I've always said, they're very conservative principles, which I think have helped protect the municipality and make sure that we're not overspending. So right now we're looking in that more 1 to 3 year horizon, trying again to be as anticipatory, I think, as we can and predict where things are going. We can definitely look at longer term projections. We can look at, what the Bank of Canada is predicting, similar to what we did around inflation and growth numbers, and present that to council. Absolutely. I think it needs to be sorry, Councillor, I think it needs to be part of our financial sustainability plan that we look to bring back in 2017, really looking at the community well-being, where the growth projections, and, again, I can tell you, dealing with, various development interests in the community that come forward, there's often a lot of those banking type questions that I'm asked in terms of the municipalities, the municipalities' level of investments and what's going on. And so a good question, and we'll get back to you with that kind of information in the new year when we bring back a more fulsome financial sustainability plan.
Thank you.
The Canadian, the actual picture for gross domestic product, et cetera, came out today, if I'm not mistaken, or I heard earlier today, and it actually is looking much rosier than it has for a while, which I found somewhat surprising. So, and the outlook in the States is not bad as well. So, Councillor Njima, you're next.
Thank you, Chair Foster. My question is about the role for emergency management and regulatory coordinator. There's no question in my mind that there needs to be support in a small town such as ours for more preparation for emergency management, and that became very clear to me and was driven home even further when I went to the Office of the Fire Marshal Emergency Management Seminar 6 weeks or so ago. Our fire chief is, as you know, emergency management coordinator, and that can be a difficult position in an emergency when he has to have his feet on the ground and he has to be out there as well as having the role of coordinator. So as Councillor Brunet talked about earlier on, our response time continues to be a difficult target to meet. And we're looking at 18 to 20 volunteers to try to meet that, to bridge that gap. Everybody has recently had huge increases in inspection and regulatory requirements, and that we had a new position, I think it was in the last budget, to meet some of those inspection requirements. So this FTE will meet what I see as another need in emergency management. So my question is, at one time there was a discussion and a need for admin assist role for fire. I'm wondering if that's, I'm sure you all fleshed that out and had the discussion and decided that this is more of a priority. I'm wondering where that is. And the other question I had is, in the discussion, in the paper, you mentioned that it's proposed that the new FTE begin in Q3. So this amount was at $256,000. Does that include just a half a year for that role?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I'll answer the second question first because it's easier, and the answer would be yes. Councillor Njima, as it relates to the conversation we went through in terms of emergency management, I can tell you that we look at our administrative needs across the organization. We've got departments that have administrative support services and those that don't. I think I've heard loud and clear from members of council where you want your focus. Some of that focus is on service delivery. Some of that focus is on some of the frontline work that needs to get done. Is there an element of all of our jobs that is administrative, including my own? Absolutely. I think in most cases what we're looking at doing is investing where we need to invest, and that isn't necessarily in the administrative element of these jobs. Do I suspect some of this job will have an administrative element to it? Of course. I think there's just the natural evolution of these particular types of roles that have an administrative piece to it. I can tell you, having worked with emergency management coordinators in the past, the skill set that they have is an important one. I think about having sat in an emergency, in a number of emergencies in my previous job, both as the EEOC director, as the emergency management coordinator. Sometimes, in an IMS model, the first one that arrives there is really the one that's leading that endeavor. Emergency management is a key resource and a key function that I relied on heavily in terms of coordinating what needed to happen in emergency. You have to, in some ways, it's very similar to fire. You hope you never need them, but when you do, you hope that they're there. I look at emergency management and the preparatory work that needs to go into it the exact same way. So. I think that's my long answer to your question around did we explore the need of a role that was administrative. I know the chief identified that in his fire master plan. I can tell you I've heard that from, and I've got the unfortunate or fortunate job of trying to disappoint all of SMT when they ask me for additional resources and challenging them internally to figure out how they address some of their needs. So yes, we had that conversation. And I think what we're proposing here is definitely looking at an emergency management and regulatory focus versus just simply an administrative focus. I don't know if Deputy Blake has anything further to add.
That was a great answer. Thank you. Through you, Chair Foster. The only thing I would add is exactly what the CIO was stating there is this will have some administrative components. However, this will, if I use the old term, kill two birds with one stone. And that support role will be a great ask, so.
Thank you. I'm very happy to hear all of that. I'm very comfortable with this position being brought forward. I just wanted clarification on what happened to the request for the admin role. This makes complete sense to me, so thank you.
Councillor Petrino.
Thank you, Chair Foster. I made some notes here through Mr. Kirkopoulos' presentation. I just want to touch on them before I delve into my questions. I think Mikey did a great job of drawing the past tax rates based on a maintenance, and now we're into a growth phase. We've got 3 subdivisions coming on board. We've got Prudhome's on board. So rather than be like a dog chasing his tail, we're trying to get those people in place because we're entering a growth phase. I'm very, very happy and would support scenario 3 right now, that it includes the special infrastructure levy. We've been, and Councillor McPherson touched on this, and we made a point of saying that roads was a key driver for everyone. I appreciate the fact that we have shiny new trucks and we have spiffy new workstations because they're life cycle costed. But we need to take a pragmatic approach to roads again. We need to start life cycle costing them. We need to get back to those basics. If it's 1.7, then we've got to be at 1.7. And I think we're going to achieve that through the special infrastructure levy, through the increase in the funding that we're going to get with a gas tax and OCIF. So I like to see that, and I want to hearken everyone. We've got to continue on that road. We had about 20 years of 0% budgets. Now, I'm generalizing, but I'm pretty sure it's in that vein. 0% budgets were seen as sexy, but you know what? In fact, they're fiscally irresponsible. So now they're coming home to roost. And you can see from the reports that, in 2003, we spent about $400,000 on roads. And our project, the scenario of the roads rehab study was brought to light. And then we really made a concerted effort of jumping up that, 1.3, and then funding through aggregates and our gas tax to get to 1.7. We've got to continue down that path because finally we're turning the corner and we're starting to make some inroads. And I think to some of the comments that I received, the taxpayer doesn't mind, and again, we asked them about a special infrastructure levy. I think they're okay with that if they see service delivery going up, and if they see roads rehabs taking place, and if they see the potholes on their roads being filled and a light at the end of the tunnel. And, we can splash up that map that we've done because we've taken a really strong direction in redoing our roads and also having those set up for the future. So I think someone's able to see, okay, my road's not getting done this year, but it's getting done next year. And we kind of changed course last year with some public input about shaving and paving urban roads. We used to wait for the underground services to be done. Often the road would fail prior to that, so we've taken a proactive approach. So we're back to investing in the basics, and we're going to be setting ourselves up for a good financial position in the future. Just a couple questions. I'm going to touch on Councillor Rinchima and Councillor Bernay's question about fire staffing. And it's not all doom and gloom because 91% of the time we're meeting the objective of the time in the rural area. Now, we're falling short on the urban. Now, again, as we go forward, I'd like to challenge the fire services to give us a report on these based on timing. So if a fire takes place in the urban center at 4 in the morning, I bet you that we reach that time because there's no traffic on the road. And this is all a function of traffic. So going forward, I hope too that, that those new fire positions we're hiring, the 16 to 20, are in the urban areas to help us achieve this. And maybe we go back to, and when we were given our fire services report, we saw the scattergram of where the volunteers lived. Now, I know over time that they move, and I know there's a real affinity to the station you started out with, but you know what? Times are changing, and if you're closer to Station 1, then you know what? It's for the best of all of us that you work out of that station. And that will get us to those objectives we need to meet. So I would task Deputy Chief Blake and Chief Hudson with sitting the guys down and having a talk and saying the importance of it. I know everyone likes to stay close to home, and familiarity, is camaraderie, but you know what? You can take that skill set and you can move it and you can still help out in a better way. With respect to the legislative coordinator, hoping that bylaw updates might be one of the areas of focus. We've come across a few over the last little bit. With the blowing of the leaves onto the road, we don't really have a bylaw update that covers that. We had our water meter fail. We don't really have an update to do that. So I would hope that that person can take those bylaws that we deem are outdated or have some holes in them based on things and bring those to the forefront and get those changed. The Economic Development Officer, we've talked about this for a couple of years. I am very happy to see this in here. We talked about taking the tax burden off of the shoulders of the residential taxpayer. This will go a long way in doing that. So I appreciate that's there. And I had a couple questions, and I got them answered, but I'm going to voice them because just for clarification, I'm just musing here because I got my time. You got your time. I got my time. And I understand, and I guess this is through to Mrs. Nicholson from the library, that there was a DC credit missed in the library funding because when we were told about the library budget, it was 4%. And then when we looked through the binder, it was 9.5%. And then here it's showing 8%. So I understand that the interdepartmental things have been removed, and I am going to work with Ms. Fife and Ms. Safani to get rid of that because that is voodoo economics at its best, or accounting at its best. It confuses me. So that's good to hear that it is the 4%. And I'm happy to see the transit pilot in here as well because we've talked about that. And just curious, my second question is as we venture down the road of doing business in different ways with our online payment portal, credit card fees. Have we calculated the impact of credit card fees on the payment of said monies? Because 2 to 4% will end up having to rebate to or having to pay to the credit card companies for that. So will that be a hit that we'll take, or will that be built into the bill?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, let me take a stab at answering all of your questions, Councillor. On the last question, we'll start with the easiest. It's built into the program fee. So one of the things we looked at, whether it be recreation and other items, is building that credit card fee into the program fee and making it a lot easier for both ourselves and I think and residents to understand how that works. Your question around bylaw and bylaw review, I was looking at Kathleen. That is something that is definitely on Chris Colling's work plan, but I can tell you there's a number of other things that are keeping Chris busy. I'd suspect that from a legislative perspective, this legislative coordinator will be working with Mr. Collings in terms of moving forward on those bylaw reviews. The volunteer service, you asked a couple of questions, already made some comments on the volunteer service. I can tell you that's something that we are going to, ensure that we keep in place as long as possible. It is incredibly cost effective. I think we've heard, our community is growing, and I think we're often looking at response times and those sorts of things. In addition to, I think, traffic and how quickly one can get to a particular fire, I think there's also the time of day that we look at. It's often harder to get, and I can tell you from previous experiences, it's often harder to get volunteers during the day. So I think what we need to do is look at our recruitment, look at the catchment, look at, again, proximity to particular stations, and determine, how best to recruit from a fire perspective. I think as Deputy Blake highlighted, there's there's attrition happening, and so I think some of the staff are that we're looking to bring on in that particular area, while the number seems high, are really meant to replace some of those that are retiring. So I think from an attrition standpoint, we're seeing that. You're right, in the rural area, we are meeting our obligations in terms of those standards that are set. In the urban area, it's often a slightly more challenging. I'll reaffirm kind of our commitment from a staff perspective to look at the roads program and to ensure we're coming back to you with an increase in that particular area, and to better communicate roads. I mean, I think simply put, you highlighted that there's those great maps. I think, those are the ones that, if we look at some of our data, probably get the most clicks and the most interaction. I think people want to know when their roads are getting redone. They don't necessarily, want to have them done this year, but they would like to know at least they're being done in 18, 19, or whatever the year is. So, I mean, I take all of your comments. If I've missed anything there, I will definitely try to answer it. And I think, every year, this is my first budget process. I can tell you every year I think we're going to look to, continue to enhance and find better ways to either share information or communicate that information with council. So.
And just my last one, and what did you say the budget impact was for the regulatory compliance officer?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I'm assuming that's a trick question. There is a zero levy impact on that particular question. It is rate funded. Our water rates are and our wastewater rates are rate funded. They don't appear on the levy, and so it is funded through there.
Well, you live in Binbrook. Many of us pay water and sewer here in town, so it will directly affect many of us as well. So, just.
But it goes back to our meeting where we heard that, this water wastewater person is going to have to build a DWQMS system from scratch. And, we did have this person in place a couple years ago. Due to some reorganization, it was gone. So I'm glad that it's back in there. And we are very, very close, and I've got a couple weeks left as infrastructure chair, that our water and our wastewater is almost at self-sustaining. So I will be in, I guess, I feel in good esteem that I'm turning this over to Councillor Brunet to run with. So, Tony, it's self-sustaining, and I know that you'll keep it there.
It had absolutely nothing to do with you. Mayor Easton, you're next.
Well, I don't have to worry about any sound bites because I think that Councillor Pachariva looked after them for all of us. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to say that I'm very pleased with the way this budget has been presented. It's been a progressive operation, but it's becoming clearer and clearer what our priorities are, what drives our expenditures, and what we need to do in order to maintain our community at a high level. We have money in the bank with this budget, and including the roads reserve, but we're focusing on the basics as well. I would say to council that the complexity of the council processes are becoming of increasing concern, and the professional approach that is being demanded of us to operate the business of the town in our governance role is also increasing. Those demands are certainly not going to be diminished. Mr. CAO, I'm interested to know, in order for staff to support our desire for metrics, driven decisions, what finance upgrades, because it wasn't obvious to me if there were any upgrade packages in here. We've just had an experience at the region where the justification for full-time equivalents and some of our other really deep information that you cannot find without a huge amount of human resources to find it is available using these programs. What do we have in here, if anything?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to the mayor, Mary said, I mean, you and I have had this conversation around metrics, and, you know, I've watched the region's process. I know the region uses PeopleSoft as a tool. It's a business intelligence tool that they're using. It's a costly business intelligence tool. I know when I got here, I asked Mr. Brown that very question. I know we've got VADM, we've got Max Galaxy, we've got a number of other programs, and you know they're functioning well. They integrate well. I was used to a different particular system, no different than the region, but again, some of these systems are cost prohibitive. I know I've had conversations with both Angela and Amanda. You know, there are business intelligence tools that are far more cost effective that can help us mine that data. I know Councillor McPherson and I had a conversation today about data and the difference between data and metrics, and we all have data, but metrics, you know, needs to be tied to outcomes. And so one of the comments I was going to make to the previous comment by Councillor Pachariva was, you know, we need to tie our metrics and what we're doing to outcomes. We need to present to you those outcomes. We need to tie it to value and the value that residents are getting for the potential $100 increase that we're looking at. They need to know they're getting value for money. They need to know that things are looking different and the community feels different. They see visible change. You know, to your question around, you know, those sorts of business intelligence tools, like I said, the one the region has is cost prohibitive, I would suggest, for us, but there are other things, and I've challenged you know, Amanda to look at that, to talk about it with her team and to figure out, you know, from a metric standpoint, from a data mining standpoint, how do we look at the data we have and, you know, start presenting those sorts of informations. I know Councillor McPherson at the last meeting had asked questions around, you know, our variances, and again, how are we doing some of that reporting so that we can become far more, I'm going to say, surgical and deliberate in terms of the information we provide. So, you know, that's my hope for 2017, that, you know, we can look at, you know, within our current budgets and look at inexpensive tools to have that business intelligence conversation. I'll let Amanda speak to that if she's got any additional comments. I know she's worked with various BI tools within the Niagara Health System.
Thank you. Through you, Chair Foster. Apologize. At the Niagara Health System, we actually just stumbled, as I was leaving, across an Excel version BI tool that's absolutely free. So I've actually had some conversations with finance right now. I'm hoping to work with IT in the future to get the data into this version so we can deliver better statistical information and deliver better variance reports.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I think that whoever made the comment about the public accepting of increases where there's value for money is certainly very, very true. But I think we have quite a sophisticated community now in many respects, and being able to have our decisions explained in a much more meaningful and concrete way is going to be very important. I wonder if part of the regional program couldn't be shared around, but I'll leave that with you. It wasn't included in the report. I suppose we talked about it several times, but I can't emphasize enough the legislative budget drivers in the fire service. It leaves us with very little flexibility, and yet we have to operate at a very high standard there. So I'm pleased to see that there is a continuation, I mean, some phasing in order to keep the cash flowing easily is well and good. Mr. CAO, today it was obvious that the Auditor General was looking at some issues around the quality of road work provincially, and so investing in the road work and getting it done is one thing, knowing that it's a good job and a good quality, and I'm talking about the quality of asphalt, not the quality of the contractor, is certainly something that could be carried out. I've not seen anything in here, any mechanism for measuring the quality of the investment that we're making in roads. So I'll leave that with you. I'm very pleased to see that the cemeteries are getting some attention. I'm sorry that I can't convince people that sheep are the good way to deal with the pioneer cemeteries, but I'll keep harping on it. And I just want to remind council that we have a cemetery trust for one cemetery that has over $500,000 in it. And so issues of maintenance and high-quality preservation in that singular cemetery should be easy to sort out. I want to look, Mr. CAO, at the FTE business cases. The legislative coordinator, I want to reinforce, is not a glorified secretary. This is a very, this is a position that maintains the standard of clerks at every meeting, and where there is 100% consistency in the advice and the interpretation of questions that we have around the legislative process. Our meetings are not straightforward anymore. We are taking on considerable complexity in all of our committees, and we definitely need this person, and this person does not need to be pulled off to do menial tasks. This is a very, very important support to council. Mr. CAO, I think you told me the number of meetings that we attend in a year. Do you recall that, what that was? And I think you gave me a comparison to the region.
Through you, Madam Chair, so on a per-month basis, when we look at just the number of meetings that we're going to have from a standing committee perspective, increasing for economic development and committee of the whole beyond just the quarterly piece to it. We've got now 7 meetings happening on a per-month basis. That's going to make for a very busy second half of this council term for members of council and staff. You know, I think the comparison that I provided was, you know, when we look at the number of meetings and the number of legislative supports within the region of Niagara. Now, they also do the standing committees. They have, I believe, 6 individuals that are responsible for doing all of those committees, including the standing committees. So when we looked at the average amount of meetings that each person had was in that two to 3 meetings. We're in that line when we move forward with this. And, you know, I would suggest that the legislative, resources within the department, all 3, while they may not attend every one of the subcommittees that we have, whether that be active transportation and so forth, they're definitely going to continue to provide supports to those particular committees. I think about heritage. I think about ones that are slightly more complex that are going to require that level of support.
Okay, well, that's definitely an important role, and I've been very worried on a number of occasions this year when we haven't had that expertise available to us. Fire and emergency service, certainly this is a knowledge-driven position. The emergency management and regulatory coordinator, again, our community is large enough now that we need to be able to stand alone and not rely on the borrowing of services or looking for knowledge outside. We need to know our community. We need to have someone who understands what the risks are in this community, particularly with new business and industry coming in. We don't have a lot of it, but it's enough that we need a knowledge-driven position. The Economic Development Officer, Mr. CAO, is it your plan to phase this in?
Through you, Madam Chair, you know, I think, you know, as we get through this budget process and we get into 2017, I think by the time, you know, we're in a position to hire this particular individual, you know, we're likely into Q2. I think similar to the question that Councillor Regime asked, you know, I think what we want to do is ensure we get the right person in this particular role. I think we want to, you know, establish the committee. We want to look at the work plan for the committee. And I think then it becomes easier to go out and look at the resource when we sit down as a economic development committee, sit down with both Vice Chair Pachuriva and Chair McPherson and have those conversations. So I think a phased approach to it is definitely, you know, the process or the approach that I'll be taking to all of these, and, you know, continuing to report back to council. I know this is one of those things, again, that I've, you know, if I look at council's work plan, if I look at council's priority plan that you've identified, and that there's significant work to do.
Mr. CEO, in addition to that, is it possible that this position could be partly revenue supported? Is that realistic?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to the mayor. I think it's a possibility. Do I want to suggest that and set an amount? I would say I think moving forward, is that a possibility? Could it be offset? Is my hope in any of these positions that we're bringing that revenues increase? I think about economic development and the potential to secure either new business or to secure additional funds from various programs and things that are available. I think that's a possibility. Could I give you an estimate right now what that would be and look at a defined revenue amount? No. I think it's something that we're going to have to continue to report back on. I think if we have one success within economic development, the position probably pays for itself, for the next decade. But again, I think, we need to get it in place. We need to establish what the priorities and the goals are. We need to work with the committee and then look to move forward.
Okay, I would also say, Mr. Chairman, that after sitting in 2 presentations today at the region around the growth plan and listening to the consultant speak about what's holding back growth in the region and also what's holding back our ability to experience some of the significant lower levies that exist in the western part in the GTHA, it's all about increasing population. And so this position has a big role to play, I believe, with the planning department in terms of targeting those markets and getting people with young families, young adults and with young families in this community. Sport, recreation, culture, we've talked about this a great deal. I think I, like everyone else, will be relieved when this department is back into a stable state again. These are huge portfolios. However, I do not see anything written in here, and maybe it's just because I went through it too quickly, but I don't see how we're going to achieve our goals around culture, because I feel that progress has been very, very diminished in that area. We've made other great inroads, but the cultural development of our community seems to be a bit at odds right now.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to the Mayor. Let me just quickly highlight, today was Director Hussein's last day. I told him he didn't need to come to the budget. He's kind of been involved in the budget process tangentially. I think Assad was instrumental, and I said this at SMT this morning to him, instrumental in, I think, moving us forward in a number of areas. I think he brought a level of professionalism, I think, to the culture portfolio. He's got some experience, again, with facility builds. I was having a conversation with Brian earlier in terms of just some of the project management work that Assad was capable of and that I think moved us forward on. I think to answer your question around focus, when I come back with with that reorganization model and share that more broadly and go through that process, I think we need to look at specifically identifying, what the focus is from a heritage perspective and a culture perspective, what the focus is from a sport and recreation perspective, and of course there's the facilities, parks, arenas, I'm going to call that operational maintenance perspective. And so my hope in coming back to you and in working with SMT and the organization within SRC is to start to have those conversations and put focuses in the particular areas where we've got work plan items that we need to deliver on.
And Mr. Chairman, I just want to understand how these positions are going to be, are we hiring immediately for these positions or we're not?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I would suggest, we're going to try to hire as immediate as possible. I think my comment saying no is, we're at the end of November. By the time we adopt this budget and move forward, we're close to Christmas. We've been focused on this budget now. We need to develop some job descriptions. I will definitely move as fast as possible on the ones, and I think look at the prioritization of them. Some we can phase in as we've discussed. I think some, will be definitely, priorities that need to move forward. I think about just the recruitment we need to go forward within SRC, on a few positions. And so absolutely, as quickly as I think staff can work, we'll ensure that we fill these positions.
So Q1, is that correct? Okay. I just have one other question. Could you please, Mike, explain the growth? I can't remember what that number is anymore, and if you could just show me where it fits into scenario 3.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I'll take you to the slide that you've got on your screens right now, and it is the key budget items. And as we took you through this 4.65 number, assessment growth has come in at 1.62%. We were looking at 1.3 initially. I think always when you look at Q3 numbers as they're presented, they're sometimes different. So our assessment growth is 1.62. I would say that's probably consistent with what we've seen in the last few years. It is on the rise, and I can tell you early in 2005, 6, and 7, we were seeing 3% assessment growth in the community. I think about a number of the projects that are coming forward. My guess would be in 2017, and this will be realized in the 2018 budget, you'll see assessment growth increase considerably higher than the 1.62.
And Mr. Chairman, maybe you can answer this since you've been the budget chief for a while. Was the assessment growth always applied for the benefit of the levy so that it could be the taxpayer could get the full benefit of it? Is that our history?
The way that, well, that's changed over the last few years. Assessment growth at one time was buried by the finance department as we were going into the budget process. That changed, and we pulled that out deliberately back maybe about 5 years ago, just so that it was very clear of what it was that we were looking at. Because the decision point was we wanted to make sure we were comparing apples to apples when it came to year-over-year budgeting. So assessment growth would be almost, if you want to put kind of a bonus that's going on, but the reality is that we wanted to make sure people understood exactly what was going on with the numbers. So.
And so, Mr. CAO, is that the plan going forward? That's what it appears like?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, absolutely, Mary Easton. I've always said we'll try to be as transparent as possible. I mean, when I was looking at data in 2005, and I'll go back to that, we had an 8.62% increase, but you actually had a little over or close to 3% in assessment growth, which offset that to 5. So I think when you look at these numbers, there's always an opportunity, I think, to tell a story with them. Our assessment growth isn't necessarily where it was in 05. It will go up, but we will, always be very clear with, the numbers that you're seeing here, what's included and what's not included, where we see revenues, and I'll highlight here. We have been incredibly conservative with even our revenue projections. I was having a conversation with Luke, during the break. We need to be incredibly conservative. I don't want to budget for amounts that are unrealistic. Do I think we can achieve them and surpass them? Absolutely. But I think that's where we come back to council and, you look at it from a variance standpoint and from a, mid-year reporting standpoint and realize that we're actually trending better than, what you're seeing here.
Mr. Chairman, I do have one last question, and it relates to responsiveness to the community. And I know that, at least it was my impression, that in the past, as things tightened up in the town, particularly when there was that great slump and people were really tightening their belts, that there were no in-year adjustments, or if they happened, it would have to be a real emergency. I may be overstating it, so don't yell at me, but I'm wondering what our ability to respond to any kind of in-year requests by community members, whether or not this budget allows us any flexibility at all.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I mean, that's a good question, Mary Easton. I think it's a conversation that Finance and I were having today. We're looking at, should there be those mid-year adjustments? Are there abilities within the current budget to do that? I think if I look to my right, your left here, you'll realize that I think both Amanda and Angela will tell me probably not. This is a very tight budget. I think it's incumbent upon us to come to you to look at where we're trending, what our variances are, if there are those priorities, and I would suggest that everything we bring to you, we can highlight, is it a priority, is it not a priority? I think we have to be fairly nimble, we have to be flexible to be able to bring stuff back to you. If there are those mid-year adjustments or mid-year priorities that arise, both that have a positive impact or a negative impact in terms of where we're looking, we need to bring them to you and highlight them. And then at the end of the year, we need to demonstrate that we've tried to find other ways to address those. Does every budget have the ability to do that? It comes down to prioritization. We would have to then, provide options where we're deferring certain items or where we're accelerating other items in order to deliver on whatever that particular community interest piece may be that is brought before us.
Mr. Chairman, I feel the staff have done a really exemplary job of positioning us well to the final decision that we're going to have to make. And on behalf of council, I want to thank you, Mr. CAO, and the staff for all your efforts.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Easton. So now the chair gets to fire a few questions before we start going back to a background again. So a couple of things. First of all, BIA, TVTA, and library, and some of these other areas where we're having increases, or potential increases. First of all, I'm not happy about us cutting out Canada 150. This is a one-time thing that's going on next year. I think we should be celebrating and having money set aside, whether or not there's any monies coming from elsewhere. So I think that's a mistake, but in my opinion, we can all decide on that. BIA, TVTA, and library, they've all made their cases for some increases. The only thing is that personally, I would starting to like to see metrics right across the board with these things. In the case of the BIA and the TVTA, for sure, I mean, those are just outright grants that are going on, so we need to do that. Library, I think we need to know and understand much more clearly what's going on within that. Having sort of a thing saying, well, things are down and this is up type of thing, we need to make sure that we understand that. Comment came through about DC charges, and just to be perfectly frank, the library doesn't decide where DC charges are going. That's a decision of the town, and so if there's any use of DC charges that is going to be used towards the library, that's in the finance department's hands, not in the hands of the library. So let's be really clear about that, okay? Administrative roles. The private sector for many years now has basically said no to administrative roles. So actually I'm quite pleased seeing that there's none having been added. I think the CAO and senior staff have some interesting opportunities in the administrative area with some retirements as well and what they're doing with that. So, but again, administrative roles have decreased dramatically within the private sector. And the thing is that even with those types of things, there's technological changes that are going in place. And I think this council has been extremely generous in the last, or we've been starting into it anyway, on making the technological investments that we need. So can't have it both ways. If we're investing in these things, we have to be making sure that a lot of the rest of this is becoming much more efficient as we're going down the road. OCIF, let's keep in mind, OCIF is not a new pile of money that we're just dumping into roads. It's the Ontario Community Infrastructure Fund. So we'll be making some decisions on what it is that we're doing with that. But let's not forget that the provincial government actually has really come to the table with this one and are providing significant funds for us to be making use of. So, you know, a lot of us have bashed the province over the last few years on what they have or haven't done. This is a good news situation for us, but let's remember, this isn't just being dumped into roads. This is a pot of money for us to be making use of as we feel fit for infrastructure within the community. I have a couple of weeds questions for you, so just diving into the weeds. On the CN level crossing study that's going on, to Dave, does that also include whistles within the community? And that's always been a major pain in the butt. Councillor Majima and I hear from people all the time about the Beamsville area. So is that included within that study?
Through Mr. Chairman, good question. It's not regulated in the study, so it's not something we have to do or look at, but through the study, we're looking at all of our crossings and their status, and we will look at the options of whistling and where it might be appropriate or might not be. So
Okay.
We'll be bringing some further information at the next infrastructure committee on the whole CN crossing study.
Very good. And the other thing is under park developments for the SRC. So it says Serena and Prokich, but we haven't even started into the design plans for those yet. So my expectation is that that's going to be completed next year, and then we're looking at full development 2018 and out, correct?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, just to quickly highlight a quick point I wanted to make on the CN item that you mentioned. I know this is a topic of conversation when we're meeting with Metrolink. CN is at the table when we're looking at the whole GO issue. And I can tell you the concept and the notion of whistling came up, and it's something that Metrolinx and GO are looking at as well, and something that we can definitely push forward and integrate into any of the work we're doing with CN. And I see Dave nodding to that as well. In terms of SRC and the parks, Serena, definitely, you're absolutely correct, Councillor. We've got some preliminary designs as it relates to Prokich. We've been working closely with the region. They've done a lot of research on Mrs. Prokich. Again, we're finalizing that RFP to start that process. I know we've had conversations with the developer who likely is bringing forward their report, or we're bringing forward that report in January, by which we acquire the last parcel of that particular property. And so we will absolutely, we'll make sure that council's briefed and updated, and the decisions are made appropriate as it relates to that design, and then moving forward, construction and so forth.
Well, there's a huge public process that's going to go into place with that as well. So I'm going to get up out of the weeds just for my last question, and the hiring of the new staff that are being recommended. I happen to have a differing view, particularly on the economic development officer, than some of my esteemed colleagues here. I'm really not thinking that we're at a stage yet that we should be hiring into position. The reason is we've had discussions at this council about whether or not we should be partnering with the region, whether we should be doing some other types of scenarios, whether or not it would be making sense for us to have a contract coming in to go and do some stuff initially. And I have not seen or heard anything to make me change my mind in this particular area up to this particular point. And I really don't like having to spend a whole lot of money on a brand new position without really having a game plan set for it. So I would feel much more comfortable if, again, we had a pot of money set aside that we could make use of, but not necessarily for salaries, but again, have a much more fulsome discussion on this in the future. So to you, Mr. CAO.
Sorry. Through you, Mr. Chairman. All good points. I take your perspective, I take your thoughts, I take your opinions, and I think we explored the option with Niagara Region. I've had conversations with David Oakes. I'm not sure that we get the same level of benefit if I'm just giving money over to Niagara Region for them to hire an EDO or to partner on an EDO with us that is really sitting at Niagara Region and functioning, although their dedicated portfolio would be ours. That's really the model that they're doing within that particular catchment. And you'll see on the alternatives reviewed on the back of it, that was something that we explored. I think the challenge that we find when we put monies aside, and effectively what you're talking about is the procurement of professional or contractual services, is that they come in significantly higher. I think we experienced that last year when we looked at communications and a few other things. It's often difficult to do that. Absolutely, I think, when we were looking at this particular option, at this particular resource, I think those were the same conversations that I was having. They're the same conversations we were having, with finance in terms of, is it something we could look at putting monies aside to do? I think the challenge is you often get far more value if it's a resource that you're controlling and a resource that is committed and dedicated to the work within the community. Notwithstanding that, again, I take your comments seriously, and I think they're good things that we always need to look at. But from the perspective of where I'm sitting here, I think it's something that I'm recommending. It's something that we're hoping we get council approval on, but we shall see when the budget's approved.
Yeah, I am going through, and by the way, I'm not, this isn't directed at anyone, although I will say the communications person and everything else, like we have 1.3% now fully coming on this year for overhead positions. We now have 4 additional overhead positions within the town. These are not people that are out filling in the potholes that Councillor Pachariva was talking about. These are quote unquote much more administrative or much more high level that's going on. So, if we are serious about taking a look at any cuts in any of these areas, definitely we have to be looking at least at these positions and understanding completely and fully before we actually invest ourselves as we're going down the road. So I know that isn't necessarily in sync with the variety of others on council, but that's my opinion. So.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, good comments. I can tell you at SMT, we had the conversation around our frontline workforce in terms of looking at the service offerings we're doing, in terms of looking how we either, if we have vacancies, do we repurpose? How do we focus on the front line? How do we focus on the filling of the potholes, the cutting of the grass? Definitely, you can look at your SMT here. I think they're all nodding. I've charged them with going back, looking at their departments, looking at their service levels, making sure that if there are ways by which they can, increase the level of service that they're providing within their complement, that needs to happen. I can tell you this, with this infusion, are we going to be back in front of you next year asking for FTEs? I can confirm absolutely not. I think we need to focus on getting some work done, demonstrating value for what council's invested in, and moving forward. Are there some issues within our frontline complement that need to be filled in? Absolutely. But my challenge, and I think the challenge that we have as a senior management team, is to look at our budgets and to look at how we do that without additional increases and without additional complement.
Okay, so before we start into second round of questions, people might want to bring up, what's your expectations this evening of council or of this committee at this point?
Through you, Mr. Chairman. So I think there's a couple of things that we've heard. We've heard about the DCs within the library. We've heard a couple of other things. I think our plan was, final approval happens later in December when we come forward. I think we need to take what we've heard. We need to integrate that into whatever the final number is. It's obviously coming down. If I think about just the library itself, your number's coming down by 1/4%, on top of what we've heard here. We'll report back to council at that particular meeting. We've got rates that we've got to discuss and have a meeting on. At the end of the day, I think what we're looking for is agreement in principle. As I said to you, I think we'll take direction in terms of what we've heard today, integrate the library into this, and come back with, I think, one final presentation. But I suspect what we're looking for is conditional approval to move forward with really what is that next phase or that next stage, and that is a conversation on our water rates, and then final ratification of this budget.
The difficulty is you've provided 3 scenarios for us this evening, so is your expectation that you're expecting us to decide that, or is this something that we will battle it out at the next meeting when you come back with some updates?
Through you, Mr. Chairman. So I think our approach to the 3 scenarios at the end of the day was to try to find some opportunities to keep some monies in. We had heard that there was, and again, I think from a staff perspective, we heard that there were some supports for whether it be the BIA or the TVTA or Canada 150, and so I think what we did is present various scenarios. I can tell you, I think I hear loud and clear as well. The levy needs to come down in terms of the impact in what we have here. I would suggest scenario 3 is the one that, if I'm hearing council correctly, is the one that is the most palatable. It is the lowest. I think we need to incorporate into that what we've heard around the DCs from the library and take that down again one time further. So notwithstanding the fact that you've got 3 scenarios in front of you, and that I think my recommendation would be scenario 3, and then we continue to work down from the number you see in front of you.
Okay, thank you. So, Dave, you had your hand up earlier. Did you want to make some other comments?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. There's just a couple of little items, and I may be in the wrong sort of area, but it's in and around the direction we gave with regards to the IT expenditures for capital and the fact that we brought it down, directed staff to bring it down to 6,000 if I'm not mistaken. But in order to accommodate the appropriate amount of hardware purchase, it would need to be, based on the report, the information update that we got, it would have to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 12.3 instead of 6. I don't know if I'm in the right time frame to deal with that, or I'm not. Because I think it's imperative if we're going to move forward with the sort of amalgamation of the IT side of the house with the library, that we need to get that, have that in the budget in order for hardware to be purchased, obviously.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to let John answer that question. I think it definitely fits within the capital budget. However, I'll let John speak to that and correct me if I'm wrong.
Absolutely. Through you, Mr. Chair, this $6,300, excuse me, would have to be added back into capital. At the original meeting, we had put the number down to 6,000 for the purchase of desktops only. In order for us to incorporate the Vineland branch of the library into our infrastructure, we also require a router and a switch, which would require a total infrastructure investment of 12.3. So the increase would be of $6,300. That's towards capital.
Are we okay with?
So you're going to adjust the capital side of things accordingly.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, absolutely. We'll, like I said, we'll incorporate that as well as the DC element from the library in terms of the final number.
Thank you.
There is one other little thing, and I'm going to respectfully disagree with you on the economic development position. I think we've spent 2 years with an economic development and planning committee, and we've been so occupied with our development, or our planning part of it rather, sorry, that we haven't really had a good focus on our economic development. And I think it's imperative that we have somebody dedicated to that economic development if we want to move forward, if we plan to move forward in the next 10 to 15 years with where we're trying to head. I would be certain that the CAO will have that particular hire, if it occurs, come with a direction or a vision or a possibility of where we would end up moving forward with a game plan, obviously a work plan. So in my opinion, I think it's just imperative that we have that position on moving forward. I don't think it's I learned my lesson last year with regards to the comms position, and this will be the last time I hear about this, as I'm going to speak it the last time. But outsourcing it seems to be more expensive. So I think it's imperative that we move forward with that. So that's my respectful opposition to your statements.
Thank God we live in a democracy. Anyone else like to make any comments? Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just with regards to our metrics coming out of the BIA, that's absolutely our goal. In fact, you saw the strategy that we put together. Our next meeting happens to be next Tuesday evening, and in that meeting we're working to develop a work plan, and out of that work plan we're going to develop measurable goals for 2017 and 18. So that will be coming. Just a question, maybe in the weeds with regards to the BIA and the CIP for downtown Beamsville. Is there a budget item for that, or is that something we manage as it comes at us?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, you'll recall, and Kathleen's leaning over, I think, listening or wanting to answer, so I'll let her take a stab. But I'm pretty sure, so this picks up on, I think, a question Councillor McMillan had at the last budget meeting. And we currently have $50,000, which is in the CAO's budget, that is meant to give under the economic development line item for CIP grants. If those aren't used on a yearly basis, they're put into a reserve so that when and if projects come forward, whether that be the Mr. Convenience redevelopment or any other sort of redevelopment, that they're utilized from that particular reserve. So we do have money set aside for that. It continues to build if it isn't used, and if there are projects that need to come forward, we have the ability to fund those projects.
Councillor Timmers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm quite good with scenario number 3. All good comments around the table. My only concern is with the Canada 150. You know, we've got a very hard-working committee. I sit on that committee. We meet weekly. We've got a very, very huge amount of work planned for the celebrations of Canada's 150th. I'm just wondering how we're going to meet some of those things that we've kind of been very public about, the 4 cornerstones, the Harvest Homecoming Festival, I could go on and on, but I'm a little concerned if we don't receive any grant money, how are we going to achieve these celebration things within the town that we've promised? So I'm a little worried about that. So I don't know if we can find some money to put back in there, or maybe if you can answer.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, absolutely. I mean, I think there's always a concern that I have in my own mind that if we're not successful with any of our grants, and I try to be far more optimistic than that, but that should we not be successful, how do we manage to do that, and not wanting to come to you mid-year and say, well, we've got a couple of events coming, we need $10,000. Is there an ability, I think, when we look at some of the monies that we've just, I think, rediscovered or discovered in terms of what was missed from the library perspective in terms of those DCs, that we could look at an opportunity or an option to incorporate part of those monies, use part to offset the levy and decrease the levy impact, and part go into something like Canada 150. I think those are things that we could look at and determine what is the appropriate amount.
I think, too, with the Canada 150, we have in the past, with one-time situations such as that, have deemed that it comes from rate stabilization as opposed to from the levy itself. So, that might be direction to I mean, the figure is not overwhelming, but I happen to agree with you. I think it would be a mistake not at least acknowledging that we need to have monies there as we're dealing with this. So, Councillor Brunet.
Thank you, Chair Foster. Here I said I'd like to come back to the full-time, the FTE. So I was wondering if you could put that slide up, because I agree with Chair Foster that the amount that's shown, it's a significant amount at $256,000. But I'm confused when I look, and I'm really glad to see these business cases. I think that's what we were looking for a week ago when we were having these discussions, is the business case. To me, that's what this is all about. If there's a business case that we can support, and there's going to be metrics and measurable things that we're going to look at throughout the year, because I'd be pretty disappointed if we go forward with all these FTEs and then we look back, a year from now and say, okay, how did we do? Were we able to drive the revenue that we said we were going to drive? Were we able to reduce, overtime from the fact that, the fire chief is having to do some of those tasks and now he can be freed up? So to me, I'm glad to see this business case, but I'm just a little confused. I mean, I do a lot of recruiting in my other job, and when I look at some of these timelines here, like with the one for the fire and emergency services, unless I'm reading it wrong, it's being recommended that would be a Q3. The mayor was asking you whether you thought that some of these FTEs would be in place in the first quarter. So, these numbers, and I realize they're just budget numbers, but, that 256, do you think that's a realistic number? Because, if these FTEs aren't going to come on until the middle of the second quarter or the third quarter in some of these cases, is that a real number? But the point I want to make here is I'm glad to see these FTEs, but there really needs to be some follow-through throughout the year for some checks and balances, because I'm jumping around here, but when I look, and I hate talking about stuff when the person's not here to defend, but when I look at the information update that we got from Jacqueline in HR, I mean, this is a great summary, and there's some good data here, but to me, the takeaway here is what the conclusions are. And the difficult thing in all of this is how you measure it. And you know, who's going to do the training? Who's going to do the succession planning? And I'm just using this as an example. Is in this report, when we look at these FTEs a year from now, there's got to be some measurable successes. I think we all know that. The important thing is making sure that we follow through to make sure that we have those measurements. But the other question I'm trying to drive is, you know, is that 256 a real number, or maybe that number is 200,000?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, let me take a stab first at that, and then your other question around measurements, Councillor. The 256, similar to the approach I think that was taken last year, is a number incorporating, you know, that phased-in approach. When you look at 4 FTEs and the cost of 4 FTEs at the various levels that we're proposing, that is the phased-in approach. Now, should there be an opportunity to elongate that phase-in element, would that come down? But that is a very, I'm going to suggest a very specific number based on calculations that our finance staff have done on the current rating of what those positions would be. And what we believe is an accurate and appropriate timeline. Can I confirm that it will be March 1st that they start versus April 1st? I probably cannot. Will those change ever so slightly based on, I think, you know, the recruitment timelines and dealing with the particular individual or the particular candidate that is successful and whatever their you know, their sort of information and informing to their own organization needs to be, and by the time they can start. But I can tell you, you know, I'm fairly confident that the numbers you have before you are numbers that incorporate those flexible and staggered timelines in order to get those positions in. In terms of measurements and taking into account, I think, some of the conclusions you have here and how is succession planning and how is training happen, and looking at multidisciplinary work teams, you know, I would suggest that, you know, that's where you need to, you know, I'm going to suggest hold me accountable, you know, and I work with the organization to hold, you know, our senior management team accountable. Those are things you expect from us in terms of how we manage our workforce, how we manage service delivery, how we look at our frontline staff, and are we meeting our legislative obligations? Are we meeting the obligations to council from a service level? So, you know, I'm going to suggest that falls to me. That falls to me to make sure that you guys have, as a council, the measurement that, you know, you're seeking. Right now, I think we're in a, you know, we're looking at data. I think we're presenting data to you. Again, I think it's an evolution for us as an organization to start using data. We need to take that data and apply a lens to it beyond just here's the data and, you know, what are we doing with the data? How's that data informing our decision making? How do we take those metrics and actually, you know, marry them, I think, as I said earlier to Councillor McPherson, marry them to particular outcomes, and how are they driven, and how are we looking at revenues, and how are we, I think, addressing some of the issues as every organization has, you know, incorporating technology, integrating, I think, the complexity of the way we have to deliver services in a far more legislative and compliant-driven, you know, time that we live in. So absolutely. That falls to me, and I think you know, you'll be seeing much more of that information come from me and the CAO's office in terms of measurables and meeting those measurables. I agree with you, and I think I said, you know, very clearly, if we're successful in the FTEs we have, and if we're successful with this particular budget, whether it be new materials that we're asking for under the basic levy piece of it, you know, I think this community, I think this council, and I'm going to suggest, I expect to see things looking very differently next year this time. I think if not, then I've failed. Then, you know, I think we failed as an SMT to deliver on what you expect of us. So we do need to deliver on that. I think this organization and this community this organization has the capacity to do that. So, you know, you need to hold me accountable at the end of the day.
So thank you for that, Mike. So Chair Foster, just one other comment that I wanted to make. You know, I think that your last comments are things that I was writing down while everyone was going around the horn. You know, when I read in the newspaper that, you know, the cost of, you know, to a homeowner is 3 cases of beer, I look at that and I say, is that really what, you know, people are looking at? And I agree with Councillor Pachariva that, you know, at the end of the day, we will be judged on how the public perceives this a year from now in terms of, you know, how they look at the services and the level that we're providing. And, you know, when you look at all these things that we're saying we're going to do, you know, a lot of them are fairly attainable that don't cost a lot of money, but as Chair Foster indicated, you know, you're putting these people into a position, and there's a cost there. But the results will be where people will see tangible differences in the community, whether it's small things like benches and garbage cans and trees in our parks, or the wayfinding signage that we say we're going to do, or the traffic calming measures, and how, you know, the fire prevention officer and the emergency management and coordinator, you know, get out to the community. That's how we'll be gauged. That's how people will look and say whether that 3 cases of beer was a good payback. So again, it's all these measurements, but I don't think we can, you know, we can't get caught up in, you know, are we keeping up with, you know, I read in the St. Catharines Standard tonight, St. Catharines is saying, you know, they want to get down to under inflationary, you know, we have to deal with the cards that we're dealing with now. We can't go back in time and say, you know, 10 years ago, previous councils weren't doing this or they were doing that. That's past history. We got to look forward. And if we're being told that, you know, people want certain things, whether it's, you know, the museum in Jordan or whether it's a new fire hall in Camden, we make those decisions, but, you know, these things that people will look at a year from now, they will be the ones that tell us whether we have given them those shared services or those improvements they're looking for. So I agree with the mayor completely. I think this, you know, this has been a lot of clarity here, and I'm fairly comfortable with where we are. Yes, we got some tweaking to do, but I think we're in a pretty good spot. Thank you.
Three minutes. Sorry.
Chairman, Councillor Brunet has really, what he has had to say, I think, has really solidified a lot of the opinions about staff. I want to take just a few minutes to just put another perspective on this. We suffer here from relevant knowledge and skills in the way municipalities operate at this time across the province. And I'm just going to use Luke's phrase, you can kick the can down the road in a lot of ways, and staffing levels and hiring, we've been kicking that can around for a long time. And I understand it because, as Chair Foster said, you know, once that base is in there, it's in there. So you want to make sure that you're getting the value for having made that investment. I think that number of 256 has probably got some substantial benefits in there. It would be interesting to know what they are, because I know that those rates are going up. One thing that I feel is a real shortcoming here, there's no such thing as a division of labor. It seems that you get hired, and before you know it, we've got 15 different jobs for you to do. I think it was a real failing within SRC. And how does a person, these are all specialist jobs. These are not generalist jobs at the level that we're expecting people to perform. So I think that that's something to keep in mind. And there is such a thing as a human resources infrastructure, and ours is pretty flimsy. And I think it's something that we have to accept, just like we accept that our roads infrastructure needed a great deal of work. So I agree with everything that has been said about this. We need to make this decision. We need to watch it. We need to balance technology versus people in the chairs, rework positions, and I know that you've already started to do that. measuring success, absolutely essential, but if we're not recruiting new people that have the skills, who can teach the existing staff those skills, then I don't know how we're progressing. So we're going to be looking for metrics, and we're going to be disappointed because people don't have those skills. You don't get them out of the air. So I think this is one that we need to be very careful with in terms of making sure we don't sell ourselves short. I think we're in a very bad place in terms of our senior staff levels and with the knowledge and skill that we need to add to our complement. We have very hard workers here, but we have staff who have been here for a long time. We need to refresh what we have and give everybody an opportunity to function at an even higher level than they have been. And I know it's possible when you get that complement where it ought to be. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I do want to take an opportunity, I think, to comment on both what Councillor Bernay and Mayor Easton said, and I think that is absolutely, you're correct, Mayor. I think we've got some great staff here. I can tell you I'm incredibly proud of the staff we have here and the work we've done on this budget, and I think that we've done this year. I think when we look back at this year and we give you a final year-end report, you'll realize that we've accomplished a lot of work, and we've done it with a very, very lean organization. That said, I think this council has seen the need to invest, and you've started doing that last year, where we saw you increase, I think, a little bit of the complement and a little bit of the budget ask. Again, we're asking for something slightly higher than we did last year in order to do that. I think our job as public servants is to make sure that there's a trust and confidence that the community has in the services we deliver. I suspect that's what you want from us. I can tell you that's what I want, from senior staff, and I think that's what the community expects from us. That is our goal. That is our focus. Folks need to trust that they're giving us their money and that they're getting services. I don't think I can emphasize that anymore, any differently. It's the philosophy I think I shared with you coming into this role, and it's something that you're going to continue to hear from me, moving forward.
Just one last thing from my point of view on it. It seems that there's general consensus around monies going towards the BIA. How are you going to treat that? The reason is that my big worry, and to be perfectly frank, I'm not sold on the idea that we should be funding that, but if we are going to be doing funding in that area, is this going to be considered a one-time thing, or is this going to become permanent funding? And the reason is that I'm not sure that this is going to accomplish in the end what's required. So how is staff going to be treating that particular funding at this point?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I would suspect, I know in the proposal that the BA brought forward, they were talking about a multi-year approach. I think they were looking at 2 years. In terms of a sustainability factor for themselves. I think I think council needs to look at that on a year-by-year basis. I would suggest no difference than the monies that we currently give to other organizations. Those monies are within our budgets, and I think they're drawn upon as required. And I think that addresses some of the comments around whether that be metrics or reporting or a level of scrutiny, so to speak, that goes with any monies that we are giving to any organization. So I think we need to establish what that relationship looks like, but I would say, it remains within our budgets and is then credited as needed in order to address some of the particular items. We've been functioning that way now with a lot of agencies, and I suspect the BIA would be in support of a similar model like that.
Okay. Any other questions or any other comments? So you don't need any direction from us this evening, or what are you going to do next? Because obviously the next meeting, when it comes back, we are going to have to make final decisions on the operations and capital budgets, right? So
through you, Mr. Chairman, I think I've heard you loud and clear. We're going to make the amendment for the library to this number. I think there is an opportunity, again, for us to look at, the rates. We had discussed that, the rate stabilization reserve. Should we need any Canada 150 monies? I agree with you. I want to make sure that we do have monies in place should we need them. But we will come back to council immediately once we hear back from senior levels of government on that particular funding and identify that particular source. That reserve is I'm going to suggest it's fairly healthy. And so I think we can look to that to, to address some of our Canada 150 needs.
So the next series of meetings then, when is the public meeting that we would be doing for this? When is that scheduled for?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I think we've got what we've scheduled, and I think we've tried to clarify the wording. We're going to have rates presented, and then we'll have a public meeting opportunity to discuss those rates as we typically have, and I think final ratification of this particular budget would be at the December 13th meeting. I've got to go back and look at the calendar, and I'm pretty sure I have my dates correct.
Okay, so you need, before we get to the public meeting, you have to have direction from council on, or from committee and council on where we're going with this, right?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, my thought would be, and I think the discussion we had is that December 13th, I think I've got clear direction from you today. I think what we have is direction to incorporate the monies that we discussed, both on the capital side, to address the library, as well as the decrease from the DC element, and this number will be decreasing, to come back to you on the 13th. The public meeting and folks coming forward to be able to talk to this particular budget or any other item can occur at that same point in time. I think we'll have a subsequent presentation that summarizes this, that's a lot more concise, so that we're not presenting for another hour. I see Will nodding. I don't... right.
Okay, I'm just concerned that I don't think it's quite as clear as you might think, but my own kind of gut feeling with this is that you should probably have a motion stating this is the way you're going with this, but like typically what we have done in the past is that we have essentially gone through and said, council is recommending that we move forward based on this and take it to the public for the next set of meetings, right? So, because if we go to the public with 3 differing options that are going on, well...
Through you, Mr. Chairman, if I can have...
One, but the only thing is that we haven't agreed upon that here yet. I mean, there's been a lot of nods and talking about the thing, but and we don't have anything official, right? So...
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I think what we're trying to do is, and you recall we changed the process this year. We went to the public early on to say, what would you like in this particular budget? We wanted to hear from them. We used surveys. We reached out via social media. I think our hope is to go to the media. If you're talking about going to the public in order to give them an opportunity to weigh in on this once it's finalized, sometimes I would tell you my thought would be that that's sometimes counterintuitive or counterproductive. I think what we want to do is make sure that we're presenting this to the public in a fashion that is easy for them to understand. I would suggest, I think the direction I have is fairly clear as it relates to scenario 3, incorporating the library pieces to that. Should council want a motion, we can work on a motion between now and December 13th to do that. But I would suggest I think I'm pretty clear from the perspective of what I've heard today. If there's some additional clarification that can be provided, we can work on that. In terms of the public, I think, from a communication clerk and CAO office perspective, our hope would be we're going to continue to communicate this moving forward. But there isn't I'm going to suggest there isn't a legislative obligation for us to have a public meeting on this part of the budget at this particular time. We did that, changing the process at the beginning of the process to solicit feedback, which could then be used in establishing the priorities within this particular budget.
Mr. Chairman, too, and I think, we've received a lot of public input from the posting in the newspaper and the articles online, and we've taken that into account already to come up with the scenarios 1, 2, 3, and then there'll be further worked upon going forward. I mean, we did the consultation ahead of time. We got rid of the flurry of green paper motions. This is so much cleaner. This is so much better, and I have faith in the whole process that it's new to play out the way it's going. So I'm okay with that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I too am okay with this, moving forward this way. I think we've given direction to the CAO as to where we're headed, and I want to see what he comes back with, and I'll be quite pleased to see that.
Last comment to you, Mr. CAO, or are you good?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I think I've said this at every meeting. I do want to thank staff. I want to thank council for your patience as well with us. It is a different process. You know, we've got some growing pains. I think we've learned from it. Will we get better next year? Absolutely. So I thank council, I think, for your patience in terms of the process we've taken you through. And my sincere thanks to the senior management team. I may be the mouthpiece that's here talking to you, but they're the ones doing the hard work behind the scenes, you know, helping us bring this stuff forward. So,
Mayor Easton, yes.
I think that Angela Stefani has done a great job. There's a lot of heavy lifting for several months, and really, by the time Amanda came, the budget was looking pretty respectable, and we owe you a lot of thanks, Angela, for taking that responsibility on with Bob's retirement, and you didn't miss a beat, and we certainly haven't lost any time. So thank you very much for that.
On that note, I'll declare this meeting adjourned.